And thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, some potential good news in the fight against COVID-19 as the latest wave of cases from the Omicron variant may be about to peak. A possible threat to the United States from Iran as the Iranian regime is threatening to attack America and imposing sanctions on former members of the Trump administration. Plus, ISIS makes a comeback in Uganda and brings chaos to the people.
A lot of people were injured. There was only one person that got killed. You never know when something's going to happen.
See how the U.S. can help them fight back. Then later, we sit down with Skillet's John Cooper as the Christian rock band drops a new album.
We called the record Dominion, and I'm so very excited about the title.
See why he calls this project rebellious. All these stories and more are coming up next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Want to begin with some potentially positive news on the COVID-19 battle. The flood of cases that have hit much of the U.S. because of the Omicron variant may be about to peak and then fall dramatically. In New York, for the first time in weeks, the number of new cases is dropping.
Looks like we might be cresting over that peak. Cases are slowing down.
The reason for the possible decline, the Omicron variant is so contagious and spreads so quickly, it may be running out of people to infect. One analyst telling the Associated Press the number of cases will go down fast as they went up. And the number went up quickly, with some hospitals still being swamped as the Omicron wave continues.
We're starting to treat patients in hallway beds.
The healthcare system is absolutely buckling right now.
Even though they say Omicron is probably more mild, I don't think we're necessarily seeing that with the unvaccinated.
Meanwhile, people across the country are still waiting in long lines to get COVID tests, sometimes in very cold temperatures. Critics have blamed the Biden administration for not having enough tests ready. Meanwhile, the White House is awaiting more possible bad news on inflation with today's Consumer Price Index report. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, taking heat over high inflation in the Senate Monday. Powell warned high inflation could make it harder to restore the job market to full health. And he said the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates faster than it now plans to if that's necessary to slow down inflation. Inflation is running close to 7%, and economists are divided on their forecast for how long it will remain so high. Meanwhile, President Biden and Democrats are focusing on voting rights and election reform. The president traveling to Georgia to talk about that on Tuesday. But it doesn't look like Democrats' plans will succeed in the Senate. Charlene Aaron has that story.
In a speech on the grounds of Morehouse College and Clark Atlanta University, the president invoked the civil rights battles of the 1960s, challenging senators to stand against what he calls voter suppression.
Pass the Freedom to Vote Act. Pass it now.
A fired-up President Biden was in Georgia Tuesday pushing for voting reform, going so far as to call for a change in the Senate rules regarding the filibuster.
I believe that the threat to our democracy is so grave that we must find a way to pass these voting rights bills. Debate them, vote, let the majority prevail. And if that bare minimum is blocked, we have no option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster for this.
The push seen by some as an effort to pass meaningful legislation after his multi-trillion-dollar social spending plan suffered a major setback before Christmas. Julia Manchester told CBN's Faith Nation program,
after Build Back Better essentially was stalled by Manchin late last year, we saw Democrats immediately pivot towards voting rights. They want to pass a landmark piece of legislation before the midterms.
Some voting rights proponents so skeptical that they didn't show up for the speech, including Georgia Democrat gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams.
President Biden saying today it was a scheduling conflict. It's sort of hard to believe that, there could be a scheduling conflict when the president of the United States is taking a visit to the biggest city in the state you're running for governor for. But I think that really tells the story.
The president maintains the Voting Rights Act is necessary to counter changes in voting rules in 19 states, including Georgia, that Democrats contend restrict access to minority voters. Republicans say the federal bill aims to create nationalized elections by requiring uniform rules for all states. The bill has no chance of getting the 60 votes needed to overcome a GOP filibuster in the evenly divided Senate. That's why the president says he'll support a one-time change in the filibuster rule. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says that will break the Senate.
The Senate Democratic leader is trying to bully his own members into breaking their word, breaking the Senate.
However, some Senate Democrats aren't ready to back the plan. West Virginia's Joe Manchin and Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema not on board.
We need some good rule changes to make the place work better, but getting rid of the filibuster doesn't make it work better.
Meanwhile, a controversial law allowing non-citizens to vote went into effect in New York City this week. While it doesn't apply to state and national elections, the Democrat City Council and Democrat Mayor support the law, giving 800,000 non-citizens the right to cast ballots in local elections. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Turning now to foreign policy, Iran is threatening to attack the United States from within. The Iranian regime is also taking direct action against American citizens, imposing sanctions on dozens of members of former President Donald Trump's administration. An Iranian military leader has gone as far as to call on followers inside the U.S. to take action. Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem on this potential danger to America.
Over the weekend, the commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Quds Force called for people to take action within the United States. He said, wherever it is needed, we will provide for the basis of revenge against the Americans from within their houses and by people by their side without us being present. In reply, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan declared, "Make no mistake, the United States of America will protect and defend its citizens. This includes those serving the United States now and those who formerly served." Victoria Coates is one of the 51 on the sanctions list who served as Deputy National Security Advisor in the Trump administration. She warns Iran has attempted attacks on U.S. soil before.
They have expressed the intent to do violence against people in the United States. You go back to the 2011 plot against the then Saudi ambassador to the United States. Obviously, they are willing to do that.
So far, Iran has not been successful on U.S. soil, but Coates says they only have to be successful once. She says it serves as a wake-up call to the Biden administration.
I would like them to see the Iranian regime for what it is. This is what they do. And so when you are attempting to negotiate with them, bear this in mind. The smiling face you see across the table from you is maybe not the real face of this regime. And look at their actions, not at their words or what they might be willing to say in Vienna.
Coates warns about being too eager to enter into a nuclear agreement. In the meantime, talks resumed in Vienna to restart the Iranian nuclear negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said Israel was not bound by the outcome of the talks.
Israel will continue to maintain full freedom of action anywhere and at any time without restrictions.
Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Congress, Jerome, warns the U.S. administration is misjudging the Ayatollahs.
They seem to believe that the Iranian leopard can be induced to change its spots. The current administration in Washington assumes that terrorism in general is driven by despair, not by fanatic religious vision, but sadly divorced from reality.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
After weeks of negotiations, there are reports the U.S. and Iranian officials believe they're making progress towards a deal to return to the Obama-era nuclear agreement. Last week, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid told journalists he believes an agreement will be reached. Back here at home, Anne Graham Lott's daughter of the late evangelist Billy Graham has asked for prayers for her daughter, Rachel Ruth. In a Facebook post Tuesday, she explained that her daughter was rushed to the hospital Saturday after suffering a heart attack. Multiple times I have prayed Psalm 73:26 for people who were struggling with heart issues. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever, is what she wrote. The mystery is that her heart has no blockages, which can cause traditional style heart attacks. Hers is a very rare condition, one doctor described as a broken heart syndrome. There is no known cause. As I write this, she is still in the hospital and will be for several more days as they continue to run tests. You can get updates on this story at cbnnews.com. Coming up, the United States is being called upon to help the East African nation of Uganda fight against ISIS. We're going to bring you that story when we come back. In Nigeria, Afghanistan, and the Philippines, ISIS is once again rearing its ugly head. Now the Islamic terrorist group has the East African nation of Uganda in its crosshairs. Both Russia and North Korea are helping to provide the terrorists with weapons and money. So the U.S. is being called upon to help the Africans fight back. Gary Lane reports on this rising threat.
The defeat of ISIS in Syria caused the terror threat to spread. One region is East Africa, where Uganda is taking the brunt. People there are on edge, bracing for more attacks following several deadly suicide bombings this past fall. Sam Childers is an American missionary based in Uganda.
It all started October 24th was the first bombing. It actually went off in a restaurant. A lot of people were injured. There was only one person that got killed that day. But right now, you never know when something's going to happen.
That attack was followed by twin bombings in late November. 6 people were killed, 3 dozen others were injured in the heart of Kampala. While the Islamic State claimed responsibility, officials blamed the attacks on an affiliated group known as the Allied Democratic Forces. The ADF is based in the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo. Some officials believe the ADF wants to overthrow the Ugandan government and impose an Islamic State. Others say the attacks are in retaliation for Ugandan army efforts to defeat al-Shabaab terrorists in Somalia.
I can't even understand people why they would want to harm somebody like they're doing. And they don't even care if it's another Muslim. All they want to do is kill. And it reminds me of Joseph Kony.
Kony is the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA. For more than 20 years, it waged war on the Ugandan government, killing civilians, terrorizing women, and kidnapping children. Known as the machine gun preacher, Childers rescued many of those abducted and established several orphanages to keep them safe. Eventually defeated by the Ugandan army, remnants of the LRA terror group fled across the border. And what about this new threat from Islamic militants?
I believe that they just want to try to take over the country. I believe that they want to put a threat there so maybe they can get some leeway. But one thing that I know the president of Uganda, and he knows how to handle these guys very serious.
This Allied Democratic Forces group, it may be harder for the Ugandan military to defeat a terrorist organization than it did an actual militia like Joseph Kony's LRA. So how great is the threat, in your opinion, in the long term?
I believe there's going to be more of the terrorism. I believe that the president, I believe the UPDF will get control, but they're going to have to get to the root of the problem.
That may require hunting down Islamic terrorists and fighting them throughout the region.
We've taken our eyes off the ball relating to Africa. The terrorist groups in Africa are blossoming as we speak.
Eric Karen is a former special agent who held senior positions with the U.S. Treasury and Homeland Security departments, as well as Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization. Karen and other intelligence experts believe Muslim terror groups are operating training camps in Sudan, South Sudan, and Uganda. And while the United States is keeping a close eye on President Putin's intentions in Ukraine, Karen believes Russian activities in Africa pose a greater threat.
The Russians are supplying various entities in Africa, countries and entities, if you will, gangs, with weapons. And that's troublesome. That's not a good sign.
Flooding African nations and Islamic terrorist groups with billions of dollars worth of military equipment, says Karen, from helicopters to rocket-propelled grenades and even night vision goggles. And it's not only the Russians. Karen says Kim Jong-un is also spreading his influence in East Africa.
the relationship with the North Korean government and the Ethiopian government relating to the manufacturing of munition items is troublesome to me.
Karen met with Ethiopian officials to encourage them to end their relationship with North Korea, a designated state sponsor of terror. So what more can be done to counter the growing threat? Karen believes the U.S. military needs to train police and armies in the region to help them fight Islamic extremism. If not, more deadly terrorist attacks may lie ahead.
I hate to see, obviously, good people die, and unfortunately, I think that's coming down the road.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Still ahead, we are sitting down with John Cooper of the Christian rock group Skillet. He reveals why the latest album, Dominion, is defiant. We've got that story for you coming up right after this. Stay with us. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Perhaps you've heard the single Surviving the Game from the Christian rock band Skillet. It's a sweet tease to their 11th album, which is called Dominion. John Cooper of the group calls this a defiant album. That's a reaction to a fear-based climate. Take a look.
Skillet begins the new year with new music.
I haven't said this in the interviews yet because I haven't had a chance to, so you're the first one. Feel special. This is going to be amazing.
This is the award-winning Christian rock band's 11th studio recording. And frontman John Cooper is still happy to unpack the uplifting and empowering message behind the music.
We called the record Dominion, and I'm so very excited about the title. I know how this ends. I'm gonna make it. This project, I think, because of you have pandemic, and all of a sudden you're home, and you're living life in such a different way. And something just happened. We did a Zoom ride with some producers that produced 2 tracks on the last record, and it just went so good. And before you know it, I was like, you know what? You guys produced, the record. I say the clouds around me start to darken. We would record some in our studio and send the files to the producers, and they would edit and send back to us. So we recorded into, we never were in the same room together. It was just bizarre. But I'll just tell you now, since my first interview, I've been able to say it. This album is very rebellious.
In its entirety, the project tackles some of the biggest issues in today's society.
I mean, the lyrics on the record are very anti-establishment. I don't know if we've ever written lyrics this anti-establishment. Standing up for what you believe in, calling for the revolution.
And Cooper says this kind of rebellion is different.
I don't mean rebellion in the way that maybe the world might mean it, right? So the world might mean rebellion like rebelling against God or something of that. It's actually quite the opposite. The state does not have the right under God to come out of their sphere and to come in to my sphere of authority that God gives me over my family. There's a sphere of authority that the church also has. So the state can't come into the church and start telling the church what it's allowed to say about theology and things like that, right? That's what I mean when I start talking about rebellion and anti-establishment.
It's a record calling for believers to take a stand for their faith.
Part of what Dominion, the song, but overall theme, is about is just defiance. So it's just a very defiant record.
And it begins at the beginning with the very first single, Surviving the Game.
Surviving the game is very defiant towards fear. I can be unstoppable, gonna walk through hell, gonna shake the walls. I mean, that's the lyrics of the chorus. And that to me summarizes all of that. I know I can be unstoppable because of Christ, but we're still walking through the battle.
The lyrics are more relevant now than ever.
The biggest pandemic happening in the world, to me, is not COVID, it's fear. It is absolutely, people are terrified. There's, of course, physical issue with COVID, but fear grabs the heart.
Even in the face of outside pressure, Cooper stands strong against any challenge to his faith. And he won't be quiet.
Dominion, to me, is a defiant record against fear. Defiance about you telling me what I'm allowed to say about my faith and what I'm not allowed to say about my faith. I will not be silent about my love for Christ. I will not be silent about what the Word of God says, even though it's getting unpopular to do so.
Because after all,
dominion is about authority, and we all know who has the ultimate authority. Start a new year, 2022, dominion.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
And for more uplifting stories like that, be sure to catch an all-new Studio 5 tonight. Tonight, we're going to be sitting down with multiple Grammy-nominated artist Dante Bowe from Maverick City Music. He will share exactly what it's like to be making music history. You can catch Studio 5 on the CBN News Channel tonight at 8:30 Eastern. Of course, you can also download the CBN News app. Coming up, they're being held as heroes. See how 4 officers were able to save the life of a pilot just seconds before catastrophe. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. A fascinating story of quick thinking, teamwork, and heroism. A pilot makes an emergency landing, crashing into some railroad tracks. A police station is nearby, so officers are able to rush to the scene within minutes. And after some maneuvering, they manage to pull him from the wreckage and get him onto the pavement. But just seconds later, a commuter train smashes into the wreckage. Thankfully, the pilot was the only person aboard the plane. He was only treated for minor cuts and bruises, and he is going to be okay. Beautiful to hear that. Time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is awake. Consider this. Just as your eyes are the first thing to open when you awake from sleep, the eyes of your heart are opened when you awake to the promises of God. With that word, open your eyes to your place in God and awaken to his love for you. There's nothing, no thing like it. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.